First, let me introduce Shawn. I know many of you know who he is, but I know there's people that don't either. And so this is a great opportunity for you to get to know Shawn. So Shawn is known all over the world. And so Shawn is a TV host. He's a news commentator. He is a media producer, and he's a Christian minister. He's been on some of the most popular shows that are out there, like Fox News, CBN News, 700 Club. And now he can add to the list the NEXUS podcast. You have to add that to your bio, Shawn.
For sure.
Shawn is the author of several best-selling books. We've actually had questions come in about that. I don't know if we'll get to that or not. He currently hosts one of the top-ranking Christian podcasts. It's called Exploring the Marketplace. I know that it has over 9 million downloads already, maybe 10 by now. And it's also a popular weekly show on CBN News channel. You can watch his shows there. In addition to that, I'm especially excited about his newer show because he does news commentary podcasts, and it's simply called The Shawn Bolz Show. But I've been listening to Shawn for a long time, and especially his podcast. But there was one particular video that really stood out to me that made a huge impact on my life. And that is when I was going through a fight with cancer. And there was times when I was thinking, man, am I going to lose my life? And Shawn did this informal video where he sat in front of the camera and he showed and told this story. And it was very informal about how he almost lost his life. And when I needed encouragement, I would watch the show. And I always thought to myself, if I ever met Shawn, I would tell him the story. And so 4 years later, I met Shawn down in Florida and I told him his story. So Shawn, I'd like to start there. If you could just tell the people a little bit about what happened in that moment of your life.
Oh my gosh, we're starting there. Okay. It's so interesting because I was walking with God for in ministry for about 10 years at that point. So I was all through my 20s. And the end of my 20s, I went through a process where I was like, God, I really want to know you. I feel like I'm in ministry. I'm doing prophetic type things that are like take teaching and take activating prayer and the whole thing in a really serious way. But I felt like I was running a lot of church politics, and I was really exhausted by human dynamics. And I felt like I knew enough to want to be a ministry, but not, or have to be a ministry, but not enough to want to be a ministry. And so I just took a sabbatical for a couple of years. And during that time, I found out that I had contracted a parasite from one of my many extreme missions trips I used to go on. We used to go on crazy missions trips. And when I contracted that parasite, it started to do such a work in my body that my doctor's like, I think you're going to die. We tried everything we can to kill it, tried all the major medicines. And they said, can we try an experimental chemo? And I thought, I'm dying anyways. Basically, it's like, you're going to die if we don't do something. This is all I can think to do. And I was young enough to where I didn't really realize there's probably other alternatives to go to. I was just local, going to the guy in Kansas City that was down the street type thing. So I did the chemo, and it about killed me. So it was worse than the parasite. And so they sent me home for hospice because now I was dying from two things. And the experimental chemo, there's 30 something hundred people on that chemo, and all but two people died, me and who ended up being my worship leader years later. It was so profound. And so during that time, I was prayed for a million times. We were part of a ministry that had a house of prayer, 24/7 prayer. And people would come over just out of good heart and want to pray. And they would ask me all the, things. Do you have this in your life? Do you have that in your life? Maybe you have this open door, this compromise, maybe it's generational sin, whatever it was. And I did it for a little while. I kind of like went through it, but then I was like, I'm being harassed by these people. Like, this is now people trying to come up with a solution for why I'm sick. What door did I open? Why did I allow this to happen? And I was like, God, I just need your compassion and your mercy. I don't know if you want me to live. I need to, and if you want me to do the things you called me to, that you've revealed to me, I need to be healed. And so for your sake, if you want me healed, heal me. Otherwise, take me. Like, I'm ready. I was so sick. And about 3 weeks after praying that prayer, I was totally healed. And I know all those other prayers, they matter. And the compassion, the empathy, they all mattered. But ultimately, it was Jesus and me together. That's, like when I just said, hey, you've always had my life, but you can truly have it for your sake, for everything that needs to play out for my life, like all the places you told me I would go and all the things I would do. I can't do those sick and I can't do those dead. So it's up to you. And he honored that prayer.
Wow. So how did that change the rest of your life when that happened?
Well, I mean, the first thing that happened in January, right after that, before I was even healed, but I knew I was in a good trajectory because I should have died already. January 2001. I heard God and he said, welcome back into my purpose. And I was like, but I'm not healed. Like, wait, does that mean? And it was so encouraging, but it was also such a question mark. What? Like almost like a pinball machine when they tilt out. I'm like tilted in my understanding. I'm like, am I going to be healed as part of this? And I think it was 3 weeks until I was healed. No, it was 5 weeks until I was healed from the time I heard from God. But then once I was healed, I had such an understanding that every part of my life is God's. And I was in no performance at all, which you'd think I'd be in more performance because now I'm going to live out this great purpose that he healed me for. But I was just like, my life is so yours. And I'm going to so enjoy it because I have it back. And I remember going to a couple of restaurants I hadn't been to in a long time, eating like really good food. I remember just spending really quality time with family and friends. And it just changed me.
Wow. Wow. Well, I can certainly relate to some of that story of how you get this revelation of your purpose for your life.
Yeah.
So, Shawn, you're known for just having this wonderfully strong prophetic gift. But you're also known for the way you build a foundation for it, and that is through love. And so you always talk about the motivation for the gifts is based on love, but over years of time, you've probably developed this gift. Is there something that you did that would enhance your gift of the prophecy?
Well, I'm a super practical person. And so for me, when I was, first starting to practice prophecy, because I believe like my parents raised us with all these, understand that we can have all gifts and that some people will maybe specialize in some of it. That doesn't mean we all can't pray for healing or speak in tongues or, go after these things. So for me, my parents were saved. And that period of time in the 80s, many people may be able to relate who are watching, where you're so saved that you're afraid to be a part of the world at all. And so you're almost like, my dad was a colonel in the Air Force. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and they like ran away from the world. And for me, what made it practical and useful to go after prophecy wasn't because I felt born for a special gift or a special office or ministry. I just wanted to see people loved on by God, and prophecy accelerated that process. So I was telling my parents, hey, if this works at church, I have to see if it works in school or if it works somewhere else. So I would have conversations with people and I would practice the prophetic. And I did it then the same way I do it now, which I would ask a lot of questions like, hey, how's your home life? And because I would discern something was going on at home, and they'd say, it's really hard right now. What's going on? Is it with your dad? Yeah. And they had no idea I was prophetically leading them on a conversation to get to a goal of being able to really address or pray or speak into their life. And someone's getting them saved. So I feel like for me, it's always been very practical and it's been very practiced. And if you want more, you have to practice more. You have to activate it in your life. And I feel like most people don't grow in the prophetic because they don't look at it like, if I'm going to go play piano today, most of us cannot play a song on piano our first time, but we can figure it out. And if we just practice and practice and practice, eventually we may be able to lead for our family at Christmas, or we might even be good enough to be in a worship team or something. And some people are going to really excel at it, but we could all play something. And I felt like even if in prophecy, I'm only good enough to play for my family, I'm going to learn how to do this well. So it encourages my sphere of influence that I have right now, which is my family and friends. So I just prayed into their lives and I asked God to give me words that would move them forward and help them to identify who they were in him and help them to have choices to make. And it was really profound.
Wow. So we have someone that's going to be coming on the show here in just a second. And nice. So we want to play something for you. And this video took place in 2015. It was almost 8 years ago.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Sharon, on July 29th or 28th. Sharon, this is you. Shawn. July 29th. Oh, we have two. This is fun. It's like a game show. Me. Okay. I'll get to you in just a second. I feel like the Lord's saying that there's an advocacy program inside of you for women, and part of it's the recovery, but there's also something about helping to form ideas and identity and entrepreneurship for women in islands, especially islands. And this is the Dominican Republic. Does that make sense? Yeah. So they're tied together. And I feel like the Lord says he's going to use your story, which you've already somehow told, I guess. And so he's going to use your story, some of that battle you went through, to create a context, even not just in the church, but outside the church, for some advocacy program that the Lord's going to give you authority to help either inspire, run, or be a part of. And I thought the Lord was saying that he's so proud of the decisions you've made. He's so proud of the decisions you made, and that they're going to affect your children. They're going to affect your children in some strong ways. And you're going to start reaping what you've sown into for hard but good decisions for a number of years now. You're going to start reaping from the benefit of those great decisions over the next 3 or 4 years. And there's not just going to be full recovery. There's been a recovery, but there's going to be full recovery. There's going to be an advancing, and your economics will change again back to what God originally designed them to be. So you have the ability to produce income through your gifting and through your testimony that God's going to show you how to do, especially with the book project. That's going to really blow you away. So bless you, Sharana. That's amazing. Wow.
This is Sharana. And so it's so funny, Shawn, because Sharana is a friend of ours. And we were talking about you. And she said, oh, I remember this prophecy that Shawn gave me in a service. And I said, you've got to find this video. And she said, oh, my mom keeps track of everything. I'm going to look at it. So Sharana, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Chad. Hi, Shawn.
I'm so glad to hear from you.
I'm so glad to hear from you and to tell you that the word has impacted my life. It's just been amazing.
I'm so glad. So what's happening in with some of those details that have happened in the word? Have you written the book?
So let me say this. The day before I went to the service, a friend of mine was telling me how you were there and you were calling people out by name. And I said, if he calls out my name, then I'll know it's real. Because Sharana, I mean, to me, that's a big deal. You hear John's and Matthew's, but anyway, that's what I told him. And so when you called me, it was like the Lord said, I know your name and I can give your name to any prophet. But anyway, I 2 months after the word, I started traveling to the Dominican Republic, and I've been back 5-6 times.
Wow.
Taking teams with me there, kids from the school there. We've done a lot of work there in the Dominican Republic. I also started a group for women, and it was for women whose kids had either mental illness or drug addictions or both.
Wow.
And so we would do that often, and I'm 70% done with my book.
That's awesome.
And
that's so good to hear.
Her story is phenomenal, Shawn. And you mentioned in the prophecy about her using her story. She was actually one of the guests on our show. We actually called the show From Ghetto to Glory.
Oh, it's awesome.
She had such a transformation in her life. And now she's the head of a youth. It's called Youth on Fire. And she is helping transform lives of youth. So it's phenomenal. So thank you, Sharana.
Thank you so much. So good to hear from you.
And so in a minute, we're going to have a youth call in as well. That's actually part of this youth and submitted a question. But so, Shawn, let's say you're up in your ministry and you're either talking to someone directly or you're in a situation just like that with Sharana. And you say, I feel like, and you got a date, you got Dominican Republic, you got book, you got story. How does this appear to you? Is it in just a thought? Is it a picture that you see? How does it happen for you?
I will say this, because sometimes people watch that and they go, I could never do that. And that's just the first response is whatever he's doing, I can't do it. Either he's faking it or it's real. If it's real, it scares me. If he's faking it, scares me, whatever. I can't do that. And the reality is that's because for 20 years, I spent time paying attention to how the Lord talked to me. And again, I wasn't one of the special prophets, one of the guys who, were born for this, were born under a sign or a star, or their mom almost died before they were born. I was normal with normal Christian parents. And I wanted to see if God's voice would make a difference in the world around us. So I pursued prophecy. Prophecy didn't pursue me. So I began to pray and ask God. And I looked at 1 Corinthians 2, which I think is the clearest picture of how prophecy works. It's the best one for marketplace people specifically. We talk a lot to marketplace people and how we're wired to hear from God. Because Paul says, no eye has seen, no ear has heard, no mind has conceived what God has in store for them, but we know it by the Spirit. And then it says the Spirit of God searches the deepest parts of man and the deepest parts of God and relates them to each other. And then we get the perceptions of Christ. So most of the way that God speaks to the majority of believers is internal impressions or downloaded thought. And we should know that more than anybody else because we're the internet generation. We're talking right now over the internet to people on the internet, to people, who are calling in the whole thing. And God lives in a cloud. So we understand cloud servers, we understand the whole thing. And so we have an opportunity together to understand that my information on my internet is coming from somewhere else and getting downloaded into my computer. Well, that's how our spirit is. Our spirit is getting downloaded God's nature, his thoughts, his perceptions, his humor, his love. And all this helps us to connect to the world around us, not disconnect from the world, but connect to the world. So for me, I just start to honor those impressions. And I still ask a lot of questions. Hey, I'll be sitting with someone who literally doesn't know. They don't know my name. They don't know anything about me. So it's not like just where, as a matter of fact, I don't do a lot of public platform prophetic ministry anymore. Most of what I do is behind the scenes with people who may or may not even believe in the prophetic because we don't travel anymore. I do mostly media. And so when I'm sitting with somebody, or if I'm in an Uber, or if I'm with some friends of friends or whatever, I'm asking God about them. And I'm just saying, is there anything you want to do here? Is there anything you want to do to make this special? And sometimes that's as much as I'll do, but other times there's more. And I may get the littlest thought of a memory from my childhood that triggers me to go, oh, there's something here about that thing that happened to me when I was little. I mean, I've got 100 Jennifers because my sister's name is Jennifer, and I'll sit down with somebody and be like, is your name Jennifer by chance? And they're like, oh my gosh, because they feel like my sister. They feel like who she is. And sometimes God reveals it that way too, so that you have the love connected to the word. So it's not just information, because God doesn't want to just inform us. He wants us to be included. And so he doesn't want to just give prophecy to tell people what to do. He wants to give prophecy to help people to know how to do it with him, not just what to do. So I think it's just a matter of practice. Like many people on here could probably relate to the fact that you have had instinct or intuition that's led you to a different result than you would have had if you didn't listen. Well, the prophetic is like that. That is a part of the prophetic, is understanding that sometimes it's in your gut. It's what you discern. And we try and make it something more direct speech. We want God to speak like James Earl Jones. Most of the time he doesn't. Every once in a while he does. Most of the time he doesn't. And so that's important to look at and go, I'm satisfied with how you speak to me, God. Even if I'm hungry for more, I want to really dwell and be present with how you're connecting right now.
That's great. So we have our next question. We have, so Shawn, you have really moved stronger to a real-time event, what's going on in society, and you talk about these things. And so we have to adapt as a church. So that's where this next question is coming from.
Okay.
And Cindy Decker, you're on the show. Go ahead and ask Shawn your question.
Thank you, Chad, and thank you, Shawn, for being willing to have this Q&A. It's social media discourse is just so important. I love it. So here is my question. In your view, traveling and connecting with the different parts of the body of Christ in America and probably around the world, what, in your view, do you believe needs to change in the way we do church, so to speak, so that there is meaningful, healthy growth? Because, I mean, obviously, a few years even before COVID, it just seemed like churches were shrinking, and the multi-generational expression in churches and communities, I mean, we were losing steam, and a lot of churches really just did not recover from COVID, or they went back to business as usual, and it isn't working. Like an identity crisis. What, in your view, do you feel needs to change?
All right.
No, that's a great question. Yeah, thanks, Cindy. I think I live out of a word that a man from Kansas City named Mike Bickle had, where he said, God's going to change the face of Christianity in one generation. And I think we've done church a certain way, and we've done it in higher forms of that way for a while. And I really think it comes back to maybe what was happening a little bit in the Jesus People movement, where there was community. It was okay to have a problem because we knew that Jesus was the Messiah. We're not. Everybody had problems, and so we weren't forcing people to come as polished gemstones into the church to be a part. They could actually be in process. And I think that vulnerability of, like, it's easy for Christians to hurt the ones that they love and to wound and to kill their wounded, because we've put performance and church growth ahead of individual lives and family and connection and community. So I think there's going to be a move back towards community, getting really emotionally healthy, getting spiritually healthy, getting relationally healthy, putting up some strong boundaries. Like, and exploring the marketplace, we're constantly asking people, how does your Christianity give you a leg up in life, or add value to your everyday real life? And we hear it over and over, where people are saying, well, I was able to get over addiction that I had as a mature Christian, or I was able to overcome bankruptcy, or I was over to. But a lot of those conversations you can't have in your local church, because they're on such a role of building that you become a liability when you actually have a breakdown if you don't tell the breakthrough story first. And so I remember asking this one guy was in our church, and his counselor, he was struggling with a really big identity issue, and it was like from childhood abuse and the whole thing. And he was a leader in the church, and I would ask his counselor, I said, how long do you think it's going to take him to get healthy? And the leader said, how long do you think it took him to get unhealthy? It's going to take as long to get healthy. It's just what it is. And so I was like, well, his whole life. And he goes, well, it may take his whole life to get healthy. Do you have the endurance for that? Because that's what you're really called to. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to have to actually give people space and room to manage their own process, and then to create boundaries that keep us both safe in that. And I think the church isn't good at that. The church wants to manage your process for you, the big C church, and so that you look right. So you, not necessarily that you are right or that there's righteousness inside of you, but you look righteous. And we have to get over that. We have to come to a true repentance and then true grace, compassion, empathy mode for each other, in my opinion. So that's maybe not the answer you're hoping for, but that's just what I would feel.
Awesome. Thank you for that. All right. So we have a young man that's actually now on the show who is on fire for the Lord. He's 17 years old. And so he has a question. So John Maniga, welcome to the show. You're on with Shawn Bolz.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Great.
So good. So glad you're on.
Hey, Mr. Chad. Good to talk to you, Mr. Bolz.
You can just say Shawn, but thank you for the respect.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, John.
So my question, this is something I think I've almost experienced a few times, but here it is. Has your spirit ever been caught up to heaven? How would you describe the feeling and what it sounds like when your spirit left your body?
Ooh, that's a great question. Well, I like what Paul said, but he said, I know a man who was caught up in the third heaven, so he didn't know if he was in the body or out of the body. I've had some encounters, and I've written some of the encounters in a book I have called Encounter. I've also talked about them a lot online. So on my YouTube channel, I talk about some of the encounters I've had. And I used to be careful. I used to think I couldn't talk about those things because it felt very like backroom charismatic. And now I feel like people are so hungry for heaven and so hungry for what God can really be like. But I'll tell you this one. I had a time when I was going on a trip to meet this prophetic man who had waited a long time to meet. And I was caught up in the spirit, and I couldn't tell you how. I just was more there than here. Maybe I was all there. I don't know. And I was driving my car. So I don't know if my car went. I don't know the whole thing. But when I got to heaven, I saw him from across the throne room. And the throne room was a room without perimeters, but God was there. And it felt like a throne room. So that's why I call it a throne room, because it felt like all the angel activities. But it's hard for me to see because I have human eyes, probably, because it felt so foggy compared to, like, I just felt like maybe if I had more connection to God, I would have been able to see better. And I looked across the room, and I saw this prophet, this man, and he saw me, and I realized it was real time. So this wasn't just like a fantasy or a dream, or I was, having some sort of weird psychedelic trip. This was like literally me who'd been praying to see more of Jesus face to face. And while I was having this encounter, I also saw this man, and he was really kind of doing some stuff in heaven that he knew why he was there, but I was just like caught up. But he felt like he had authority to understand the heavenly realm. So when I came out of this experience, and I ended up meeting him 30 days later, and he said, I've seen you before in front of a whole group of leaders. And he goes, where have I seen you? And I didn't want to say it because it sounded so spectacular. But I said, in heaven. And he goes, oh yeah, it was November 2nd. And I was up there doing this, you were up there doing that. And everyone in the room was like frozen, like, wait, what? Like, you all were in heaven together at the same time? And he goes, I was in a vision, but you were like beyond a vision. And so it really gave me a faith for some of the other experiences I had to go back and really look at those things. But I think God wants to show us more of heaven, because he wants us to feel like in heaven, there's no divorce. In heaven, there's no sickness. In heaven, there's no depression. He wants us to feel that atmosphere. And sometimes when you're in worship, for those of you who are like, this sounds very out there, when you're in worship and you're in a heightened state of awareness of just Jesus, that's what feeling heaven is like. And then if you have more of an encounter about it, on top of that, sometimes there's instruction, or sometimes there's something you're going to carry from that atmosphere into your career, your family, a ministry, if you have a ministry. And I think it's important that we recognize that, and we give credentials or give credibility to that in our own life, so that we can anticipate what comes from it. And it changed my whole life after it happened.
Oh, awesome. Thank you, Shawn. Appreciate it. All right. So this next question, I think you'll recognize the voice. Don Mitchell, welcome to the show.
Yay, Don.
Hey, Shawn, good to see you.
Oh
Hey,
my
I've got a
gosh.
question.
You can call me and ask me anytime, but it's fun that you're on here asking.
I know. I've been on the receiving end of many prophetic words, and some of them I put my actual hope in because I believe they were from God, but they weren't. And I've worked through the disappointment of that. But I realize that experience is now hindering me from stepping out more in words of knowledge, because I don't want to give people false hope if the words are wrong. So how do I move past the fear?
Great question.
I think it's great. And I think for me, if I need to repent for any word I've ever given you that didn't come true, I repent right now. But it's there's not a repentance culture in the prophetic, and people don't really track their words that much. And so what I did when I was from about 2014 to 2019, I was tracking every prophetic word. Wow. I was going back to people and texting them and saying, as many as I can get the emails for. If I could get the email, if it was I would ask our team to get the videos that we had from because we did a lot of our own tours, and I'd have them find the emails to the people however they could, and then we would try and email them and say, thanks for coming to our event. I gave you a word. Did that make sense? And I would get feedback. And after a couple hundred of those, there's 2 or 3 people who needed that because they were disappointed with what didn't happen. The fulfillment. One was a cancer where the mom, I had all the information about her whole life, and she died anyways. I felt like she was going to be healed. And it was a very specific kind of cancer. And the family was completely private about it and had never told anybody she had cancer. And she died the next year. And so at that point, no one even knew she had the cancer except for God and her immediate family. So it caused some pain in the whole family, because there's a word of knowledge, there's a promise of healing. And then when they walked it out, and she's a righteous woman. So when they walked it out, she died. They didn't know how to reconcile that. They love God, but they didn't love necessarily the prophetic anymore because they felt so failed. So when I called up and I was like, hey, how did this all work out? And they told me she died. I was able to I actually got really emotional with them. It was like, I'm so sorry. And we just had a really good talk, and we've stayed connected since then. Like, where they've actually just that brought them forward to know that I could be fallible. just that brought and that I was confused too, that it helped them to hear my human process about the journey of, in the New Testament, we're all justified by our own faith. And so it's not like the Old Testament where God's leading us as a prophet and or through the prophets. And if we don't listen to him, we're going to die, or he might abandon us. In the New Testament, each one of us has the Holy Spirit. So ultimately we're accountable to walk with God ourselves. So he gives prophecy to encourage and comfort and strengthen us, not to necessarily lead and direct us. So we have to each have our own relationship with God. But what we've done is allowed prophets to not have accountability, or allowed prophetic voices to not take responsibility. And so when you're in relationship with somebody, you can say, I was really disappointed when this didn't happen. And their response hopefully should be like, I don't know what happened. Like, I'm so sorry. Like, I don't know that I'm sorry for trying to give you a word, but I'm sorry that it didn't happen. And that's okay. A lot of my words that I felt the strongest about weren't what happened. And then a lot of the words I felt the weakest about were what happened. And I'm confused by that, but it doesn't diminish the fact, because there's all the stories that did happen. So it didn't take away my desire to prophesy, but it did make me go, you know what, for certain things, when it comes to life and death, when it comes to marriage, when it comes to babies, I'm gonna be real soft. I'm gonna go after this unless I heard an audible word of God. I'm gonna go real soft and say, hey, is there anything going on with your body? Yeah, I have cancer. Oh, is it maybe this kind of cancer? Yeah, I'm going to pray with you for healing. Instead of saying you will be healed, I'm going to pray with you right now for healing. And that in itself is a prophetic spiritual encouragement for the stage we're at in the journey. And I feel like what a lot of us do is we get a word of knowledge, or we get a sense of the prophetic, and we over exaggerate, we get overexcited, and we one up it, or we upgrade it too much. And then the person, like if somebody goes, I feel like there's going to be a financial breakthrough for you, a lot of people might say, there's so much money coming your way, but it could have been $200 just to make rent. So I mean, it's like we somehow get into false connection of the words because we're not being real in the relationship with the people who we're giving them to. And so I think if you just take it one step at a time and going after the prophetic, and just, again, softer, ask questions. If you're praying for somebody and they have bitterness towards their husband, and you're like, man, what do I do with that? Like, I feel the bitterness. Hey, is there anything going on with you and your husband? Oh, you're really disappointed in him. Well, let's pray about that disappointment. I feel like God wants to help you with that. And he wants to do something in your marriage, versus he will heal your marriage and you will see a total difference in your husband, because they might still end up divorced 2 years from now. Yeah. But God might be encouraging that moment to like really help them to move forward. And I feel like some of us are trying to go beyond encouragement into being God for people. And I just think that it's a Messiah complex a lot of prophetic people have. And I've had it before. I've had to repent of it, get out of the ego of it, and come back into, what is this for in the first place? It's to help human beings that are like me to see God, hear God, and know God. And I don't have to add anything to it. And I also need to know that sometimes naturally in my frame, I'm going to misunderstand or misrepresent maybe what God was really saying. So I have to be open to dialogue in the future.
That's so good, Shawn. And I'm going to give you an opportunity to share how you train people to do that, because in my background of being a national sales trainer for a large pharma company, this is how we would coach people. We would coach people on how to have these effective conversations, a lot of times asking questions even before making statements. These are really good communication principles as well. And so even when we give these prophetic words, sometimes there has to be a cooperation. So for example, if you prophesy that their marriage is going to be restored, well, maybe that's God's will, but they still have to participate with the idea that they want it restored. Or so there's so many different things. So we have one last question because we're out of time.
Love you, Don.
Okay. So this is a fun question. So also a fun person. So this is also a young man. He's 17 years old, and he just so happens to be the great grandson of Derek Prince.
Oh,
and
so
we're going to end with a fun question.
I love Derek.
Ethan Enns, you're on the show with Shawn Bolz.
Hey, Mr. Chad. Thanks for having me. And hi, Mr. Shawn. Thanks for having me ask a question. So as Mr. Chad said, this is going to be a fun one. Here it is. If you were to go back in time and meet and be friends with two Bible characters, one from the Old Testament and one from the New, who would they be and why? And Jesus is not allowed.
I love it. So the first one would be Solomon, because Solomon, the word that he asked for, the discernment he asked for in his dream, which God gave him language for, was a word that means he shared the mind of God. Like he literally was perceiving with God's thoughts and mind. So I would want to meet with him at the end of his life, because I believe he probably wrote Ecclesiastes in the beginning of his life and was disappointed. And he probably wrote Song of Songs in the end of his life, is my personal conviction. Not necessarily, it's not theologically, can't be proven, but I believe that's what happened, because I believe he came back into connection, intimacy after he'd fulfilled all kinds of things. And I'd love to know what it was like to build the city infrastructure, to build streets and education and a judicial system, not just the temple. The temple, of course, I want to spend a lot of time with them on, but I want to find out what it was like to see that level of heaven on earth, because a lot of the Jewish people still today believe Jesus hasn't returned, and he's going to return and build naturally like Solomon did. And that's why they were hung up with Jesus, because Jesus put our inside world right again, so we can see God in our outside world. And so I would love to see what putting God in our outside world the way Solomon did would look like in our generation. So I'd love to get some feedback from him. And then in the New Testament, I'm a sucker for John the Beloved. And I would just love to know, like, again, towards the end of his life, because he lived the longest of all the disciples, tell me your stories. Like, tell me, like, when was you knew him face to face? What was it like 30 years in and 50 years in when he wasn't face to face with you anymore, but he was inside? And what was the difference? And how did you learn how to like stay in that place of that connected, beloved intimacy that you talked about? And I think I would just want, I mean, he wrote the book of Revelation, like the fact that he was entrusted with the revelation of revelations. I'm like, I just want to hear it from your own mouth. I would just love to, but I love that question.
That's really good. You surprised me with those answers. Those were good. I don't know if I know someone that would pick Solomon or John, and your explanations were phenomenal and your rationale. So, okay. So here's the last thing. So you have something called Spiritual Growth Academy. You just taught us so many things right here on the show. And I'm assuming you're going to go so much further in Spiritual Growth Academy. Tell people what that is, and then how they can actually do it.
Well, we started right after, just about a year ago, but we started training people right after coronavirus or right during coronavirus and saying, some of you need a place to where you can learn about prophecy or healing or deliverance or the gifts of the spirit or some of the supernatural stuff, dream interpretation. And you don't, maybe your church does it once a year, or maybe you don't go to a church that has that. And so we started an online 4-week course long school, but there's a backbone of Discord chat and also weekly connect groups where you can go to a connect group to meet everybody else. And we do a lot of practice. So there's teaching, there's questions and answers, there's impartation. And then I lead a monthly student body meeting, and then I lead a class every 3 or 4 months. But we have some of the greatest people leading classes, like coming up with Cal Pierce from the Healing Rooms, doing a 4-week healing class. And they're in a move in the Healing Rooms. If you've never heard of them, they have something like 7,000 around the world. And they're in a move of the presence of God where people are being healed of very real things again right now. And then we have, like, next month, I think we have Gary and Sarah Morgan, who are doing a mini school of the prophets. The month after that, we have Mark Verkler, who's like the grandfather of hearing God's voice in our generation. He was the first one to create an accredited Bible school course for colleges on hearing the voice of God. But he's not going to be teaching traditional hearing the voice of God. He's going to be teaching how to hear God's voice for intimacy, connection, and healing, like inner healing. And he's just amazing at that. So we have dream interpreters, people who teach on that. And it's really unique. And so it's a 1 monthly price of $24.99. You get all the classes, and there's an event every month as well. And you get all the back catalog. So it's been really successful because we didn't want to become a higher learning, like higher education place. We wanted to be a place where the average person can go and pick some subjects that they really want to grow in and have 4 content pieces to those. There's actually 8 a month for the classes, but it takes about 8 hours or less to get a foundation in any of these things. And you're going to do it in a really fun way. So I'm going to encourage everybody to join us at Spiritual Growth Academy. You go to Bolz Ministries, BOLZ ministries.com, and click on it and just try and take a class. A lot of times we'll have a free class in the beginning or an auditable portion, or sometimes in our events, we do half of it online and half of it for the students. So just come check us out.
I encourage you to do that. You can also find all this information right in the Nexus Mountain Network app. You go here and you go into Nexus Influencer folder. You find the handsome man right there on the top, Shawn Bolz. You touch on that and you'll see Spiritual Growth Academy, which I think I did that correctly. I'm upside down. There you go.
There it is.
And you can explore right there. Shawn, thank you for helping us get through some of the technical issues and bearing with us. I'm so thankful you came on the show. Thank you for being on the Nexus Mountain Network. We look forward to working with you more in the future. There's so many exciting things to come. And thanks again for being on the show.
Oh, it's so good. And it's so good to be able to talk about the prophetic, because I feel like I live in social and news commentary. So it's fun to come back and, revisit these places too, which is so awesome.